Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you're well caffeinated and ready for something a little bit different. I'm Letty Conrad. I'm the product experience architect at LibLinks, and I'll tell you a little bit more about LibLinks later if you don't know us. My colleague here, Carrie Kirkpatrick from the ASM, and our third presenter could not be with us virtually or in person, but we have an amazing recording from him. Will Payton at Coventry University. He leads discovery and analytics there. So we're looking forward to having Will come to us virtually. Just a reminder, you can use this code of conduct if you'd like to know more, but the Charleston Library Conference is an inclusive and professional event where we respect free speech. Let's just be kind to each other. Sound good? And if you have questions at the end, please be sure to grab a mic and introduce yourself as well, your name and your affiliation. So this is as accessible a recorded experience as possible for those who come later. So what we're going to do today is from a technology provider perspective, from a publisher perspective, and from a librarian perspective, how do we design data and analytics tools to support the needs of publishers and libraries? And this is a little bit different because oftentimes we're diving into the types of reports and the data points that are there. But today we're going to actually take sort of a human perspective, if you will, and the human experience of interacting with data. And we all have different perspectives to share on that topic.
What's that? Humans?
Humans?
We're humans.
Robot doesn't need humans. Okay, as I said, I'm Letty Conrad, product experience architect with LibLinks. If you're not aware, LibLinks is a provider of identity management, access controls, and all the yummy data that comes from those two services. We've just turned 11 years old, and we are serving both publishers and libraries with different sorts of products and services, as well as their end users. We have just over 60 clients worldwide, and in 2024, we recorded over 1 billion events, so that's a lot of yummy data. And in our industry, standard practice for usage analytics is the infamous spreadsheet. When you Google, say Google Images, counter reporting, or counter standards, all you get is a sea of spreadsheets, right? And I don't mean to bash the data table. I love a good spreadsheet. I love formulas, macros, pivot tables, all that good stuff. But spreadsheets, from an experiential perspective, lack context. Spreadsheets, taken in isolation, make usage data sort of flat. It doesn't give us the bigger picture. Tabular, two-dimensional data experiences can be limited, and they are not always conducive to a kind of analytical flow. Complex data sets, and frankly, terminology, especially to a non-counter expert, it can be really daunting. I mean, what's an item request? What's an event type? Whatever those things are, we always have to translate those terms, right, so we can speak a common language. Most consumers of our usage reporting are not data scientists, right? How many data scientists do we have in the room? Okay, fine, prove me wrong. We have one data scientist, right? How many folks have a data scientist on their staff or on their team? Probably not very many. We are often dealing with generally non-technical users, ones who have a very high demand to make sense of the data, to derive meaning from the data, to develop metrics for impact. But we are not necessarily the types of users that understand the complex data modeling behind usage reporting. So our goal at LibLinks is to build tools that help libraries and publishers unlock more context in their data, unlock the human stories within their usage data. And we're thinking about that in a couple of different ways. One is we want to bring those stories into focus by triangulating the right points of data. So you can imagine a report, say, of an organization's item requests. What does that tell you? Not very much. If you put that organizational data maybe next to a subject taxonomy, along with some regional data, you start to bring more of a storied picture to what's going on in those item requests. We want to develop a really user-centric approach to interaction design, and our aim is to offer really simple, intuitive tools where you don't need a ton of training, and you don't need to be the hotshot data scientist that we have here in the room with us. We're looking to build the types of tools that you can customize, that you can export, maybe even embed and extend for other purposes. And to do that, we began with a beta program. We began with a group of publishers who were willing to talk to us about how they use data, what their needs are, where they get stuck. And we did that through a couple of different exercises. We ran some card sort testing, and we really looked to better understand how publishers and librarians are interacting with the metadata that's behind that usage. How do they interpret terms? We also conducted and have been conducting ongoing interviews with publishers and their clients to understand what sorts of use cases are out there, what sorts of stories are folks looking to tell, what meaning are they looking to derive from their usage data. And from there, we've been developing wireframes and now testing prototypes, and I want to share with you a bit about what we've learned during this process. One of the things we've learned, and this is in quotes because I actually had one of our publisher clients say, well, we're all dealing with fractured experiences, fractured journeys across the usage landscape. Despite counter standards and our many, many attempts over the years to normalize usage reports, libraries and publishers are still struggling to compare apples to apples. Content in this heavily syndicated world is coming from lots of different platforms and lots of different sources. We have to log into different, interfaces in order to pull the data, and sometimes they don't match up. What we've learned in our research is that often publishers and libraries are coming into analytics tools with one of two needs. They're either looking to explore trends in the data, just want to drill down and see what's going on with Harvard or what have you. They may also already know what's going on, or they already know the piece that they want to explain, and so they're in a more explanatory journey. They know exactly what data points and the filters that they want to capture. So we want to build tools that can allow either of those journeys and can support both of those journeys. And what we've learned is that publishers in particular, and maybe true too for libraries, but the publishers that have been participating in our beta program have been telling us that they really want to begin their exploration from any number of data points. Same for explanatory journeys. There are going to be sales managers, maybe that start with an organization or start with their region. Editorial managers are interested in drilling into usage data by format, right? Multimedia, books, journals, or by subject or by title. Product managers, they're probably more interested in usage trends across platforms and often look for aggregated snapshots of data. So folks want to begin their dive into the rabbit hole from any number of starting points. And in those card sort tests that I mentioned, we learned from publishers that their use of analytics gets hung up sometimes with the terminology and the labels. And we don't always understand the same thing from those terms. There are relative priorities and needs for those data points, but we're not always speaking with a common language. We asked, in this card sort test, we asked, what do these metrics mean to you? Where are your most important starting points? And from that, we've developed user journey models. We've learned that dates in particular are a really important foundational step. So even if sales managers are more interested in their region and editors are more interested in their titles, they all begin by setting the dates. We've learned that selecting those date ranges is often the first step because that's sort of the frame in which, right, year to date, or this month compared to last year at this time. And I luckily have an incredible group of engineers that have dived into our own usage data and have helped us understand that 94% of reports that are downloaded from LibLink systems were for the last year or less. 83% of reports were from time periods in the preceding year. So we're using some of that trend analytics to help default the dates that you begin with. And altogether, this means that, at least for Counter, our date picker should allow for some immediate defaults, but also easily allow for customizations and changing those filters. So I mentioned the triangulation of data. This is part of what we're trying to achieve with these tools, is helping publishers express the value within their usage data. So again, an organizational report of item requests is telling us only that. It's only telling us how many times a thing was requested from one organization. We add to that the regional data, we add to that the type of organization it is, we add to that subject data, and we start to build a picture. For instance, we have, say, a community that is a public, policy think tank, and they are in the EU, and they are looking at defense, and they're looking at particular types of methods in that space. Well, we can start to get a sense of, well, they're obviously looking at policy around defense in the EU. So we can start to allow our publishers to build some context. So as we're thinking about how to serve that data beyond the infamous spreadsheet, we're establishing some standards. So depending on the data of interest, that will drive what options we serve for visualizations. So for instance, pie charts, not my favorite, but they are a circular graph that are used to illustrate kind of a part to whole relationship. Well, that isn't going to always work for every report, right? A pie chart's going to be great for certain things. In other cases, you want, say, a line chart or a graph that is excellent at illustrating the evolution of trends over time. Bar charts, for instance, comparing values from different categories or groups. So we're starting to assign for each type of data request, assigning which are the obvious visualizations to present to users. And our guiding principles are really around, as I mentioned, the intuitiveness, right? So not expecting someone to spend hours looking at tutorials, needing to go to a training session. We're wanting to lower the barrier to entry and just let all these non-technical users jump in and start playing with data and exploring what's going on there. We want them to enjoy the rabbit hole. Our UX principles are also based around building a joyful experience, something that feels playful and light, something that could be even immersive. So I know you're dying to know what we're working on. So let me share with you what we've got right now in beta that we're testing with publishers or getting ready to test with publishers to support exploratory journeys in particular. So everything at the top of this design is clickable. And you notice it's kind of a big blank slate. What we call that in user experience design is a progressive disclosure. We're giving you a blank slate with Lego-like buttons that you can click and drag and filter. And as you do that, the data table will magically appear. So instead of starting out with a big, dense spreadsheet, a tabular, 15-column, thousands of rows sheet, instead, we're inviting you to play. We're inviting that click and drag, kind of exploratory experience. We're calling these bricks, right? Legos have really been a sort of guiding principle, guiding aesthetic, if you will. So this is what we're working on for the exploratory journey. We're also working on a couple of different options for the more explanatory journey. So once you've got all the right filters that you want, we're going to then give you a really easy way of visualizing that. You can either come in and use the default settings or change those settings yourself. Of course, at the bottom of the page, we're also presenting the data table. We can't get away from the spreadsheets, right? It's part of the reality of our lives. But we're trying to build a layer of tools on top of that data that will be playful and inviting and hopefully immersive. So that's what's going on at LibLinks, and I'm next going to invite our virtual speaker, Will Payton. If our wonderful tech support would help us pull him up, that's what comes next. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to this talk. My name is Will Payton, as already stated. I'm the head of content discovery at Coventry University, and I would like to thank you all for coming to this talk today and to listen to our experiences with data analytics and user experience. Just to give a brief introduction, to the University of Coventry, Coventry University. We're a large teaching institution post 92, meaning we got our charter after 1992. Where primary focus is teaching undergraduates, but we do have a lot of postgraduate talk programs and research posts, and a small number of highly focused research centres in areas of teaching strength. My role at the library is as head of content discovery. As already stated, I actually look after all of these areas, reading lists and acquisitions, etc. And I sit on these committees. So you're welcome to look at my LinkedIn profile if you wish. So let's have a look at library-focused analytics and why they're important and what we can do to make the user experience of them better. One of the things you need to know before you do your visualizations is who are your users going to be? Is it going to be your director? Is it going to be an academic librarian? Is it going to be a content librarian? Are you going to be presenting it to academic colleagues, senior academics in the university, or teaching academics? Your audience is key to knowing what you need to present and in what way. And there are different types of data that we want to be presenting. So strategic data sets are looking at the big stuff, the big data, the kind of the top level things, the headlines, if you like, the benchmarking. But there are also informational data sets. You know, how much are we spending on stuff? What do we actually own? And what do we have access to? And then there's decision-making and operational data sets that you use on a day-to-day basis to try to understand what needs to be done, what analytics you can utilize to improve the service, and so on. So we're going to look at some of this in this talk. But what is the problem? Well, I mean, here I'm going to show you some tabular data. As Letty mentioned previously, this is not terribly accessible for the majority of people. It tells you lots of useful information, and you can do lots of stuff with it within Excel. So this is just a counter 5 report for Cambridge, reporting on 2 metrics. It gives you all the information you need there, but it's still fairly inaccessible. Even if you add table functionality and filters, and sort things out and add heat maps so that you can see where your core areas of usage are. This is okay, but it's not terribly functional for people who are not used to looking at data or interested even necessarily looking at this sort of stuff that their eyes go skew with. I mean, again, there's lots of stuff you can do, like if this is a pivot table, just pivoting the titles by the usage with a slicer. All this is really good, and you can use this stuff, but there are other things, there are other ways to present data that make it accessible and usable. So I'm going to quickly look at Power BI and data visualization, because this is some of the work that we've been doing here at Coventry. Just to give you a brief introduction, Power BI is a business intelligence tool put out by Microsoft. It's accessible to non-data scientists such as myself. There's a couple of versions of it, desktop and app version. The desktop version is free, the app version requires a license, and it enables you to create vibrant visuals such as the one you can see on your screen. It also enables you to do lots of rich data modeling and relationship building between different data sets with disparate data in them. And in here we've got a picture of a fairly complicated set of relationships between dimensions tables and facts tables, which produce a star schema of data. In the middle you've got fact, and then at the outside you've got the dimensions that are filtering those facts. One of the primary benefits, particularly the desktop version, is the Power Query function, where you can import data, normalize it, index it, do all sorts of really powerful stuff to the data and clean it up so that when it's being used to produce reports, again, it's going to be much easier for people to understand what's going on. So I want to say what we need the right data for the right story. And so at the strategic level, for example, a visualization like this, which shows the overall usage of e-resources within the library over the course of a few years, gives a top-level picture of what's going on. And here we've got the bunny ears. I like to see you see the bunny ears sitting out there, but it gives you a sense of, we've got 2 semesters. We have a mini cohort in the summer, and that mini cohort's getting bigger and bigger as years go by. We've also got declining student numbers, which have meant a decline in usage overall, but it's really useful to see all of that in a single visualization. It's all based on counted data, and in fact all of these visuals are based on the exact same data. It's just different ways of presenting it. Here's another. It's exactly the same data, but presented in a bar chart. Sometimes people prefer bar charts to line charts. Same data again, but this is a bit more complicated. We've got a couple of ways of comparing usage across platforms. Here's a donut graph there on one side, and there's a tree graph on the other side, and then there are the top level figures in the boxes. This one happens to be filtered down to 2024 usage. And then Power is very nice. You can click on a particular publisher, in this case Cambridge, and yeah, you can see how that compares to the 2 different areas of usage against all the other types of resource usage that we've got on other platforms. And this is really quick and easy and fairly accessible. So this is strategic top-level data. But obviously we need data for decision making. So here we're looking at Sage journals, and we can see a usage of Sage journals over time. So we might be questioning the use of a particular subscription, but potentially we might be asking, has the school not been engaging with the journals? Has the teaching shifted? What it might be. But this gives you a nice picture of the data over time, again, but a bit more focused. And of course, we've got some numbers now, so we can start putting numbers down to for those that are right in the teeth of understanding usage and understanding what that cost might be for these resources. Another way to look at this data here, again, we're looking at Cambridge encounter data. You can see we turned on TA in 2023 because the usage immediately upticks, and we can look at the usage of the years of publication that people are looking at. So here we're filtering to 2024, and you can see out of all the usage in the Cambridge platform, this is what the students, this is what the academics, this is the areas of the journal that they're looking at, and this helps us to make decisions about what types of renewal we need to do, or whether there might be some education that needs to be put in place for using of the back catalogues and so forth. Here's another way of viewing the year of publication data, this time by Wiley, and you've got some journals, titles, so you can start looking at the journal titles. Again, you can see here, this is interesting, it skews to the front list, which is what you might expect. But as you start to dig down into the journals themselves, here's Journal of Advanced Nursing, you actually see the usage is spread across the many years. This is, again, useful to know when teaching our students, our nursing students, what to look at and where to look at. Well, clearly the whole collection is useful, and they don't necessarily need to skew into the front list. And there's probably looks like there's a paper published and around about 2019 that was important. So, and again, there are operational data sets to understand patterns of usage over time. So here we're looking at 3 of our services: the books, loans, the reading lists, and the gates. We can see when the students are engaging with the library and when they're not engaged with the library. We've got the cliff edge of the end of term at the end of May there. And we can compare different parts of the library service to each other. Here we just overlay again, we're overlaying Primo. At that point, the reading list data looks a bit shrunken because compared to the catalogue, people are using that a lot more. That's what we'd expect, but they're kind of using it at the same time. So again, they're engaged at the same points. You can see the peaks are all at the same time. And this is just a slightly interesting visual because it runs counter to the previous one. This is not the library resource, this is the learning management system in the university, and this has been people logging into that system, and you can see everyone logs in on a Monday. Those are the spikes, and they don't really use the system throughout the week as much. as they do in the library, where you get a peek at the end and a peek at the beginning of the week. And again, Power BI is really helpful for focusing our understanding of when the library service is going to be peaking for its usage, who's going to be using it, and when they're going to be using it. Here we're looking at semester terms. We can really see the week by week trends over the semester, the increase in usage of most of the services, except the reading list service, and the decline actually of print loans, because we have auto renewals. People don't need to borrow the books once they've borrowed them. Another operational data set here is changing the granularity from daily to monthly, and this is looking at indicative usage of the resources for different reading lists. Here's the aggregate at the very top line of that aggregate data. You can see huge amounts of usage that isn't attributable to a course. That makes sense because most of our resources are there as wider reading. Many of our resources, however, are of course for reading lists, and we might want to start looking at that in greater detail. So here we can look at this College of Law, and we can see when our students are engaging with the law material that's on their reading lists. Again, we've got semester trends here. Strong trend in April, less strong in October and November. We can have a look at the titles and the indicative usage of the titles. So at the top here, textbook on land law, fairly obviously that book is being used as a primary teaching tool for land law course. And we can see some of the usage there, some of the unique item requests over this period will almost certainly have come from that particular reading list, because we've got 350 clicks from the reading list into that resource. And you can also look at individual courses and when they're running, and this gives you again useful information about when the students are engaged and what they're engaged in. And that's just a taste of some of the things that you can do with Power BI to improve the user experience of data and give rich stories. So I thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and the rest of the presentation today.
Hi, I'm Carrie Kirkpatrick. I'm the journals platform analyst at ASM, and I'm here to give sort of the publisher view of what we're doing with analytics. This is going to be more of a top-level view than what Will gave, but he gave an excellent preview to what you can do in Power BI. So a little bit about who we are. ASM is a society of over 38,000 members. So we're not a small organization, but we're not huge either. So we have a staff of about 50 in our journals department. So this will give you a taste of who's using these tools. Not everyone's using them, but quite a few of them are, especially as they receive more training and really dive in to see what's in there. We have 6 subscribed to open journals, 8 open access journals, and 3 review journals in our program. So what are we trying to solve with these data problems? So the main one is we have data in so many different places, Clarivate, Dimensions, all of these different sources. And, I've had staff come to me and say, where do I get this information? Like, where can I find it? And a lot of these sites that you send them to aren't quite user-friendly. And, you just start to put the picture together. It's like, we need something better. Yes, I can send them to these places, but are they really going to get what they want? We're also using the data for different purposes. So we're looking at, what's trending, what's working, requests for what are our top cited articles in this journal, or top downloaded articles in that journal. And so what we're doing, I use Power BI as well as Will to kind of put all of these resources together. I've made 3 sort of main dashboards for our staff, and this is for internal use only. So I didn't have to do any card sorting for what we're doing. But we have an article metrics dashboard that shows, pretty much anything you want to know about an article, accesses, citations, what's the altmetrics score, what collection is it in, all sorts of data about an article. Journal metrics are more top-level metrics that are journal-focused. Who's using it, where, what country, where is our traffic coming from for these journals, and what are people searching for in these journals. Our marketing dashboard is mainly like usage of TOC alerts, what are they clicking on, our advertising stats, and also our social media referrals. So, if they're running a certain campaign, they can track the success of it. So why did I use Power BI? Well, it's a Microsoft product. It's a lot of institutions and organizations use Microsoft products. So if you're used to using Excel or PowerPoint, it's kind of a natural progression into Power BI. So if you have that base knowledge of these tools, Power BI is going to be pretty easy for you to learn, especially if you're just going to be a user and not on the development end of things. But as far as like Excel, if you know how to do like a pivot table or how Power Query works, how a VLOOKUP works, this is going to be really easy for you. There's a lot of available training, so I had a lot of internal resources since others on staff use Power BI. LinkedIn Learning has a lot of tutorials you can take to learn it, and there again, if you just want a basic overview of what it is, you can get that, or if you really want to dive into the nitty-gritty of how you can create your own dashboards, that's available too. And then Copilot is another resource. I say that with caution because oftentimes I'll ask it like, how do I do this in Power BI? And I have to ask like 3 or 4 different times before I get a real solution. But that is available. So this is a little bit hard to see, but this gives you a snapshot of our main data dashboard that I put together. And so you can see you can slice it and dice the content in many different ways. So there's a data slicer there. There's drop downs, search bars. So you can get the data about an article how you want it. And then when you click on the table menu, you can choose to export the data, and then you can bring it into a spreadsheet if you prefer and work with the data that way. But I wanted to give our staff as many tools as possible to get to what they want. Here's just I'm going to give some examples of what we're doing with Power BI. So this one shows you, we're tracking like our subscribe to open journals fairly closely since this is a new program for us. So we want to look at the usage over time. Once the content became open in January, we're really tracking where the access is headed. And then one thing I wanted to point out with this slide is, so each journal is color-coded, and one thing I made sure to do is each journal has one color, and if you go to different dashboards, that journal is going to have the same color. So it just gives the user a little bit easier way to track the journal they're looking at. And so I've also put together some stories in Power BI. So if staff come to me with questions, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's certainly worth tracking further, I add it to Power BI as a story. So some of the things I've put together so far are the articles that are subject of a podcast cited more? Articles that are subject of a press release, are they cited more? So I'm able to track these things, and then you can use the different sliders and drop downs to even go further with that information as well. So this is tracking our session referrers, so who's coming to our site via where. This is our AI usage, and it's pretty clear-cut. I think everyone's usage is going to reflect the same thing. I typed in ChatGPT into the search box, and it gives you the progression of that usage from ChatGPT. Some other popular visuals that I'm seeing among our staff. So the one on the left is a scatter plot, and I'm tracking citations and accesses and looking for maybe some outliers. And then in these tooltips where if you mouse over a dot, it will show you what journal it's from, and then snippets of information about that article. One thing I noticed when using the same scatter plot is we had one article that was like way over in the citations axis and not very far on the access, and I'm like, this doesn't look right. And I looked into it, and Web of Science had one of our articles cited over 11,000 times since 2023. I'm like, well, I would love for us to have an article that was cited that much, but that's probably not right. So I went to Web of Science and said, could you look into this? And sure enough, it has like 38 citations instead. But that's one thing that you can detect when using these different visuals for different purposes. Another visual that's really been popular has been the word cloud. And this is based on the article titles of specific journals, and I think our managing editors uses the word clouds a lot for just presentations to editorial staff and things like that. So those have been really popular. I've been asked many times to kind of tweak the data for them in certain ways for them to use the word cloud. So this, I didn't know if this was going to work. This is just showing you how you can take your Power BI reports and bake them right into a PowerPoint slide, and it's live data from your Power BI. So this is a PowerPoint slide, obviously, and you can use, all the sliders so like this is from one journal, and right in the PowerPoint slide, you can change it and show data from another journal, which it's working really slow right now, but I figured I'd have trouble with that. That's why you don't do live demos.
They're risky.
And it wouldn't be a library publisher conference without noting the AI capabilities of Power BI. So one of the things that you can do with it, since Copilot is baked into Power BI, is you can ask it questions about your own data that you've put into Power BI. Now this I've learned involves a lot of training. So a lot of terms, it's like, I don't know what you mean by that, even though you have your data right in there. So I've trained it, I don't know if you can see, but the terms that are underlined in blue, I've trained it enough for it to understand what that means. So unique clicks, it knows what that is. It knows what I mean by article alerts, so TOC alerts, by journal, so it understands the term journal. And then once you ask that question and it understands what you mean, it will give you data right in the AI tool. So here, another question I asked it was, which journal published this year was the most cited? And it understood enough to give me the top cited 2025 article. The red underline shows that it didn't really mean what I meant by published. So it guessed that I meant print publication date, which, maybe I meant to see the electronic publication date, but they're very similar. So that was very close. And of course, this is the article. It's about avian flu that was our top cited this year. So that's really fun to play with. It's really fun to train to. And that's another part of Power BI that's been really popular with staff, just playing around with it. So what are we going to do with this? Some future use cases we have. We just adopted a customer data platform, a CDP, so I'll be tracking that closely to see what kind of impact that has on our usage. We also just signed on to the Wiley AI Gateway project, so we'll be tracking what impacts that has on our usage. We also just adopted a taxonomy via Hum. I think we have a Hum person in the room who didn't pay me to say that, but but we adopted the Alchemist taxonomy. So we're going to look at, you know, our users using those topics pages and, you know, how they might be using them. And we'll also be working in our KPIs into the analytics as well. So, and I guess we're at the question time if we have time.
I think, are over, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. No questions, sorry.
No, we tried. We will be here, though.
Yeah,
we'll
we'll be
stick
here.
around, so please come chat with us. And a huge shout out to our tech team
Yes,
for making
thank
the
you.
recording and all of our complex stuff work. So thank you all so much for coming.